Hey guys, what's up? It's Ripe again. In today's video, an entitled neighbor Karen constantly trespassed on my property to use my pool. After I lock her out, she breaks into my garden and calls the police on me when caught. Here is what happened. Subscribe to Ripe on YouTube and hit the bell to turn on notifications. I grew up not having much, and when I had kids, I always wanted to give them the kinds of things I never had. They were not spoiled, I just wanted them to have a good life. I worked hard and got pretty lucky to end up with the job I have that pays me well. I have what some people might call the American dream home, the kind that you see on a postcard with a nice fence and a 2-story house. In the backyard, I have a pool and a trampoline that the kids absolutely love. They always want to have friends over so they can play and of course want me to join when I'm not at work. Everything was great except for one problem, my neighbor. This woman is the total opposite of what I had done with my life. She does not seem to have much, but instead of working hard, she just tries to take things from other people and make excuses. I know that some people are not as fortunate as I am, since I grew up in that kind of life. This woman though constantly would trespass when my family would leave to use our pool and trampoline. Honestly, if her kids wanted to be invited over to play with mine, then that would be perfectly fine. Her kids were mean to mine though, and I was not going to force my kids to play with them. So she would just sneak in with her family when mine was gone. Every Sunday we would go and volunteer at a soup kitchen so she knew when we would go out and not be home for a while. I was tired of it and decided to put a big fat lock on my gate to keep them out. It seemed to work for a while until one Sunday we came home to see that the lock had been broken off of the gate. I was first worried about robbers and had my family stay in the car while I looked. It turned out that my neighbor had thrown a party in my backyard and about 15 adults and a bunch of kids were just using my pool, jumping on the trampoline and making a mess. I was angry and started telling everybody that they had 5 minutes to get off my property and anybody remaining would be arrested for trespassing. That got their attention fast and most of the people ended up running right out of there while the neighbor took her sweet time. About an hour later, the police showed up at my door and it turns out that Karen had called them. They said that the neighbor was pressing charges against me for assault and started to actually put me in handcuffs and read me my rights. I was trying to explain to them, but they did not really seem to care because I was a large man that had been accused of hurting a child. My wife luckily ran in with our security camera footage and begged the police to at least look at it before arresting me. I guess they saw the panic on our faces and decided they would watch the tape while I was sat down still in cuffs. On the video, you could clearly see the neighbor and her husband coming up to my gate with bolt cutters and destroying the lock. Then setting up for a party and guests arriving. Then the normal stuff before I showed up and kicked everybody out. They did not know what exactly to make out of all of this, I don't know why because it was in front of them, and decided that they would talk to both me and the neighbor together. As soon as she saw me, she started yelling, "Neighbor, that's him, officers! That's the man that hit my poor innocent child for no reason!" "Officer, ma'am, I just want to get some statements about what happened before we do anything. You say that he hit your son and hurt him? Does he need medical attention?" "Neighbor, no, he doesn't need medical attention. This man just needs to be in jail for hitting him." "Officer, okay, we still need to take a look at the child and where he is injured before we can move forward." Neighbor seems reluctant but brings her son outside and tells him to show the officers where he has that horrible bruise. It turns out that he has a small bruise on his ankle that is common when you're on the trampoline and land on it not right. My kids get it all the time and never complain that it even hurts. It was clear to the police that this was not from me hitting him at all. "Officer, the other issue at hand is that we have video footage of your husband breaking the lock and all of you trespassing on his property." "That's a lie. We were invited to have a nice little afternoon with them," the neighbor said. The officers obviously did not believe this because they could see the video and told me that I was not going to be facing any charges, obviously. On the other hand, neighbor and her husband were going to get in trouble for what they had done while I was away. She was only given a warning, but the husband ended up getting in a little bit more trouble. Because he broke the lock, he was also charged with vandalism. Looking more into who he was, it turned out that he was on parole and doing these things broke his probation. That meant her husband had to go back to jail and she was left with a warning to stay away from my property. She knew that she couldn't do anything because without her, the kids would end up in the system instead of with their parents. I could see the boy knew that what his mom was doing was wrong and they were a product of their environment. They had to pay me for a new lock and the police finally left after getting us to sign a bunch of paperwork and give them a copy of the footage for legal purposes. Neighbor had moved on to giving me the dirtiest looks every single time that our paths crossed. She did not dare to say anything to me, and it seemed the happier I looked, the more annoyed she got. I made sure if she was in view to put a huge smile on my face like I was constantly having the best day of my life even if I wasn't. The pool ended up being a little too hard to maintain, so we sold it and instead got a nice swing set for the backyard. The kids love it and honestly I did too because it was the childhood I wished I could have. When I would swing with my kids I could see over the fence at neighbor and how she looked so angry at me. It was satisfying because I knew that being in that kind of place sucks and the two ways to handle it are like the way she did, where you stay miserable. Or the way I did, where you make the best of it and try for a brighter future. And yeah guys, I don't even know how these entitled people have the audacity to come on other people's property, then go one step further and even call the police on them. Anyway, let's continue with the next one. The next one is titled Revenge on the Manager. I have worked at a certain home improvement store for close to a decade now, about 8 years roughly. The first 7 was in NC before I moved up further north to be with my best friend and her husband, who I learned was pregnant with my first godchild. As such, I transferred up to a store in the area and put my nose to the grindstone. I worked garden before and did that for some months before I started to be moved from department to department, as this store was low on staff. However, this was not full-time, my old HR had dropped the ball and this store believed I wanted part-time. Having already moved, I grabbed a part-time overnight job at a gym to make ends meet and continued to work all the while asking repeatedly for full-time at the main job and never getting a definitive word back or change. Several months into this, my goddaughter was born. As I lived with my friends during this time and during the time of the virus pandemic, I spent quite a lot of time helping to raise her and we became close. I would take time off that I was allotted to help look after her and there was little problem. Half a year into this change and I had made a good name for myself. I did not have a good deal of friends per se, but I was respected for my work ethic and willingness to help out anyone in any department that asked me. Enter a new assistant manager. The ASM was abrasive to the staff and used to getting her way. The first I heard of her was when she outright fired a girl working the front desk because of a Playboy tag on a jacket. Myself and several other employees organized a walkout in protest of this and succeeded in getting the store manager to reverse the decision made by the ASM. This was not our first walkout, having done this in the past when another ASM, the current predecessor, made sexist comments about a cashier. Soon after this, I was given full time by the ops manager working in receiving for a cantankerous supervisor. We often did not get along, especially as my godchild got older and I took on babysitting duties while her parents worked and slept. It was not something I minded as I adored the child. I often talked about her with my coworkers and loved to show pictures and stories. However, this was not something shared by my higher-ups. My supervisor was upset that I could not work overtime to help him, as we were the only two in receiving for the store, because of either my second job or babysitting. And soon after the second walkout, I was made aware of a rumor circulating around the store that the child was in fact my own daughter that I had fathered outside of my friend's husband's knowledge. The source of the rumor was unknown, but my ASM had made disparaging remarks to me in the past about men taking care of children, so I had my theories. My holiday plans, asked of in advance as soon as our electronic system allowed, were cancelled without explanation, both Thanksgiving and Christmas. I had never missed a major holiday since I moved north, and I had asked the same days off the year prior, and had gotten them off before the ASM arrived, which was strike one for me. And soon after this, my supervisor, whom I work closely with every day, had a positive virus test, forcing me per company rules to self-isolate until I could get a positive or negative test myself. During this week, as it took a full week to find a place with enough room to give tests thanks to the variant, I was harassed repeatedly by text and phone call by both management and my supervisor to track down an at-home test and get back to work ASAP. All the while, I had to inform everyone I was in contact with, including my friends, family and roommates, that I had been exposed, risking their own holiday trips and plans, which was strike number 2. Thankfully though, my virus test was negative. A week after this, the Northeast gets slammed by a snow and ice storm. I drive a 4-wheeled vehicle and so made it in, but near the end of my shift I was made aware that my friend's husband had been injured and stranded in a car accident on the ice, and so left to get them home and their car to a service station. To add to it all, they have lost power in their home with an infant, leaving me with the only person they could turn to with a vehicle and power. I'll admit I had few sick hours left, but informed work that I would be out on a family emergency. For that week I called out each day with ongoing family emergency, with snow and ice still coating the streets and power still down throughout our city. And every day I was hounded by calls from management demanding I return to work regardless. This would not have only risked my own safety, but would have stranded my family at my apartment with no way to get supplies or get home once the power returned, which was strike number 3. I was done. Early in the morning that following Sunday, I walked into work and placed my resignation letter on HR's desk. That is important later. I had tendered it to be immediate as I live in an at-will state. Was it petty? Yes, I'll freely admit that. I had given 8 years of my life to this company and asked very little in return. As I was leaving, I crossed paths with my supervisor, who asked angrily if I was finally coming back to work. I informed him of my decision to leave, ignoring his provocations, and left to go home and sleep. Several hours later, I received the gift that would ignite my semi-accidental revenge. A single text from my ASM. "We will see how long you can take care of your love child without us." Well, seems I found my probable source. My friends had been made aware of this rumor from the start. I did not hide anything from them and did not want any kind of rumor, however unlikely, to reach them from anyone but me. They are my closest friends and compatriots and have given me the greatest gift in the form of my godchild, whom they insist I call my niece as I am family. Love child feels like a slur against her, and I'm not cool with that, and neither are they. However, they informed me of the monumental screw-up my now former ASM had made. It was time for corporate HR to be made aware, and so I began to compile my evidence, the texts from my supervisor, the call records and messages left, and this holy grail of a text message. If I was going to leave, I was at the very least going to give some blowback on the team that had been so willing to target me. What happened after is secondhand from friends I had still at the store, so I cannot entirely verify all of it, but the ASM played herself. The following day, a meeting of management and supervisors was convened, where the ASM made it known that I'd been fired, not self-terminated, for job abandonment and immorality. And unless I am grossly misinformed about the nature of American retail work, immorality is not a fireable event. To my supervisor's credit, he defended me to the ASM and was fired on the spot. The store's HR rep, having earlier gotten my printed termination letter on his desk, made it known that I had indeed not been fired but left on my own. And the ASM attempted to fire him as well in front of the staff. And from there, it spiraled. According to my source, entire departments began to walk out or outright quit, having had their own problems with the ASM. Appliances quit to a man. Garden left with their manager to work at a competitor's, as he had been working on this well before my saga began. Front desk walked out in protest as it came out that the ASM had threatened and blackmailed several Muslim part-timers to not wear their headscarves if they wanted hours. Lumber receiving's main partner quit. ProDesk joined the front desk protest as one of their number. A Sikh man had also been threatened. Both head cashiers quit and the other trained cashiers walked out with the desks. Ops manager had informed the district manager and quit outright before he arrived, walking out with the HR rep and my old supervisor. My source's last report of the ASM was seeing her sprinting to her car after having heard that the district staff was inbound and the store manager was forced to shut the store down for the next 2 days, last I have heard. I've been in contact with the other injured parties and we are compiling all the evidence we've collected, as several of the families are hiring lawyers. I suspect the company will attempt to keep this quiet. I just never suspected that anything like this would happen. I have a full-time position at the gym upcoming and I've been enjoying the extra sleep and time I get with my family. I am never working 56 to 64-hour weeks ever again, and I will never darken the doorstep of that store again. I hope my ASM enjoyed the temporary rush of power. I suspect you won't get it ever again, at least not in manager positions. And yeah guys, for some reason I really enjoy the stories about bosses/managers from hell getting what they deserve, even a little bit more than the neighbors from hell stories. If you feel the same, please don't forget to like the video, because that would help me tremendously. And the next one is titled, I guess you are salty now. I was not the perpetrator of this petty revenge, only a witness. Preface: I love my family. Every member of my family is incredibly intelligent and has capacity for great kindness. With that being said, I do have one family member, my aunt, who is, well, a full-blown Karen, haircut and all included. The setting to set the stage: I was staying with my grandma for a weekend and we decided to go visit my aunt, uncle and my cousin. Uncle was out at work, so aunt, grandma, my younger cousin and I decide to go out for lunch. We decide on Applebee's. For you non-Americans, Applebee's serves neither apple nor bees. They are an American restaurant and regular bar that has many TVs that show sports, but is definitely not a sports bar. When we arrive, we are seated at a table near the very crowded bar. We have recently been handed our menus when my aunt notices what's on the TV, attracting the large crowd, which is a wrestling match. Aunt: waiter, could I grab you for a second please? Waiter: sure, are you ready to order? Aunt: in a minute, could you change the channel on the TV? Waiter: we have quite a few patrons watching that. If you want, we could try to reseat you. Aunt: no, we have already gotten our drinks and taken off our coats. Now please, my daughter is 10 and she doesn't need to be seeing that. Waiter says nothing. The waiter changes the channel to golf and immediately every patron around that particular TV is glaring at us from the bar. At this time, my grandma and I were firmly horrified, as my aunt had managed to not only piss off the restaurant staff but a bunch of patrons. Shortly after we order our food, which is delivered in a longer but not unreasonable amount of time, grandma, cousin and I dig in, enjoying our normal dinner fare. Aunt then takes a bite of her food. Aunt: she spits out her food. Aunt: what the hell? OP, grandma, taste this. Sure enough, aunt's food is about 90% salt and tastes like a big old mouthful of chewy ocean water. Me: wow, aunt, I cannot believe that happened, understanding immediately why our food tastes completely normal. Aunt: does your food taste like that? Me: nope, definitely not quite that salty. Must have been a mistake from the kitchen. Aunt wastes no time in flagging down a waiter and complaining at length about the salt. She ends up returning it to the kitchen while angrily glaring at us eating our food. Her food returns, she goes to take another bite, it's just as salty. Her rage inflamed even more and she flags down a waiter. Aunt: hey, what the hell? This is still salty. Waiter: if the dish is not to your taste, then I guess you don't like that dish. At this point, aunt is absolutely fuming and demands that we all leave. Grandma, cousin and I all quickly wolf down the little remaining on our plates as aunt tells grandma not to pay for aunt's meal shortly before storming out the restaurant. Grandma pays the bill and tips heavily. And that is, guys, why you should never piss off the staff at a restaurant. However, I'm not really sure if the aunt understood and learned her lesson. Anyway, thank you for watching. I hope to see you again tomorrow.